Hey, I'm Kyle. Welcome to this episode of the Newfoundland Hobbyist. The Newfoundland Hobbyist is sponsored in part by Robinson's General Store in Middle Arm, Noble's Timber Mart with locations in Springdale and Bayvert, Knife and Axe found at youngandmackenzie.ca, Outdoor Pros located in Mount Pearl, Newfoundland. If this is your first time tuning in this season, you would have missed part 1 of this awesome project, building a custom knife. If you want to go ahead and check that out, you can head over to youtube.com, search my name, Kyle Noseworthy. You'll find my channel, and you can easily find part 1 of this series. So that's where we are right now. We have a beautifully finished and heat-treated blade. Not sharpened yet. We don't have our final edge on there, but we're going to leave that for now. And the next step is to put some handles on this thing. And I have just the material here. I've been wanting to use it for a while. I've been saving it for a special project. I think you'll really like it. I've went ahead and taped up the blade to protect all our hours of polishing. We don't want to spoil that at this point by getting a scratch in there, and then we'll have to work and work and work again to repair that. So hopefully we can avoid getting any scratches. Now here's what our tang looks like. If you remember, these 3 holes are just epoxy holes. So we have a pin going here, and then 2 pins, smaller ones right here going on this diagonal. What I've chosen for scales is this layered micarta. It's black and white layered, or more like a charcoal and sort of a light gray. And then I'm using some cherry red liner. So this is nice and thin, and this will go against the black side, just like that. Because you can see the inside is black, outside is that light color. So then this will get sandwiched like so. It's probably a little bit hard to visualize now, and our tang hasn't been cleaned there, so right now it's black, but that'll be a polished, a beautiful finish. So it'll get sandwiched something like that. And then when it gets final sanded, that red of course is really going to pop in there, or I think it will. Now because this is layered, what happens when you start contouring the handle, I've used a little piece of scrap paper or micarta here to demonstrate that. But once you start putting on some angles and contouring it, you expose those layers. So imagine that around this knife tang. You've got some of those crazy shapes and designs, and then when we cut around the shape of the tang here, and then we start contouring based on that, we're going to get some really awesome patterns. And the nice thing as well is this stuff is virtually indestructible. You can get all the blood and whatever you want on this from hunting, of course. Nothing other than license hunting. All the blood and stuff that you want on this, and you just can't destroy it, because micarta is basically some kind of fibrous material which is clamped with resin. So it's basically just a big block of resin. There's nothing to hurt. It's super tough, really durable, doesn't change with the seasons, not affected by cold. So that is the plan. What we have to do now is do a little bit of prep work. That is drill our holes, which we had to be really precise with to get this all fit together. And then we're going to epoxy this together. So what I'll do now that I have one hole in is I'll put a pin, just tuck a pin in this hole so nothing can pivot off of that point. putting your pins in like this while you're drilling, you know everything has to be perfect. So when we drill this last hole here now, these two are already pinned in place, so there's essentially no room for error here. Now our hole's drilled beautifully, everything's super precise and clean. That's one nice thing about working with materials like micarta and G10 or synthetics, is that they're perfect all the way through, so there's no issues with knots or grain or anything like that. There is one mistake. I don't think it's going to be a huge issue, but I realized after I had it drilled that I drilled both on the same tang side. So because I wanted, these are white on one side, black on the other, because I wanted the black to be in on both sides, I should have flipped the tang over and did opposites, but now you see what has happened here. So now the issue is when I do a glue up, I have the black on the inside against the red, and then the white on the inside against the red, and then our glued scales are going to start off in these colors. Now we're going to grind off a lot of the surface thickness anyways, so it's not a big deal. I think we'll end up with a pretty similar look on either side, or I'll certainly try to make it so it's like that. And last case scenario, it just doesn't look good, or we end up with mismatched scales. Not too big a deal, not too torn up about it, but it is unfortunate. I'd start over, but I only have one set of these layered scales. Okay, it's almost time to glue. We've got everything fitted. I gave the scales, the surfaces that were getting epoxied, I gave them a light sanding just to roughen them up, because they come with sort of a gloss finish, which, as you probably know, doesn't take epoxy well. So I just gave them a little roughening there to give it a little bit of added surface area. Now I'm going to wipe everything down with a little bit of paint thinner, and that's just to remove any oils, which epoxy also doesn't like. Now I have some slow cure epoxy here. That's what we're going to be using on this blade. Try to squeeze at a constant flow rate to get an equal 50-50 mixture. Get our clamps on, press that into place. Now I have to wait one terribly long day to get back to my knife again, and you lucky ducks, by movie magic, get to come back and see this knife in 3, 2, 1. It's just as simple as that. You guys get to come back 24 hours later, when I've been biting my nails here waiting for this thing to dry up, because I can't wait to start carving away at that micarta and show those layers. Like I said, it's the first time I've used a layered material like this on a knife, so I'm really excited. The epoxy, super hard. We use a slow cure epoxy, so it's much harder than what I usually use, but also a much stronger bond. I'm going to use the bandsaw now to knock off the excess on these pins and trim away some of the bulk of that micarta, just to save on a grinder and save on the dust. It's a lot cleaner and more efficient to cut it away on the bandsaw. Now here's where it gets super messy. So we have those layers, look at that. I think that's going to be awesome there. We got that bulk taken off as much as I felt safe to do without risking cutting into my steel. Now we're going back to the belt grinder, 36 grit belt, and we're going to carve away some of that bulk. Now because of our mistake. If you remember, we have black on the outside over here and white on the outside here. When we, once of course we get rounding and contouring the handle, you won't have that single surface out like that. It'll be all kinds of layering. So I'm hoping it's not too noticeable, and if it is, of course, I'm hoping it doesn't look too bad. We got those 2 pins we did on an angle, and I think that was a great choice. I think that's going to look great when this is all done. Personal safety, very important. This handle's really starting to look awesome. Like I was thinking, now that it's ground down to this level, you really can't tell that the scales are mismatched. They're not much different at all. A quick look at the knife and you would never know. You would have to really count up the thickness of the layers to see that they were mismatched. You can get an idea. It's still pretty rough. It's just finished on the belt sander there, 120 grit, and I'm going to start off now hand sanding. Hand sanding takes a while, but that's the only way I've found to really get it perfect. So we're starting with 150 grit, and we'll really bring this handle into shape. Man, it's looking so good. Hope you like that pattern, white, black, and that tan color. If you remember what that blade looks like when we pull that tape off, it's gonna be a lot of fun. Yes, I have a line on my forehead from the mask, but that handle is finished sanding. You ready to see it? You didn't think I'd show you the finished knife already. Still got a sheath to make, and I don't want you guys to change the channel. Nice, beautiful cow shoulder here that I've already, you can see, took quite a bit out of, but this is what we're going to be making our sheath out of. I think I'm going to come over here. This is a beautiful, little bit thinner section. Let's see what we can make up here. So I scored my line here, marked and drilled my holes, and I don't score the other side usually until after I've drilled the holes, because sometimes the bit goes in on a bit of an angle, and you don't get that perfect line on the back side. So I wait until after, because if one does go out, then I've got a groove accordingly. Now everything, I'll just do a light, super light score here. Okay. And it does look like I need a slight adjustment for the back side. Looks like everyone went in on a touch of an angle. So I'm just going to score accordingly. There we go, meeting all my holes perfectly. Lovely. And now, since I had to wait to score, then I also had to wait to dye my leather. So now I can go ahead and dye the sheath black before we stitch. I'm just going ahead with the dye here now. It's a beautiful USMC, United States Marine Corps black, which is a super deep black. Just a beautiful, just check out how deep that is. And on this undyed leather, oh, it just sinks in so well. Just look how potent that dye is. Give it a look back over to see if there's any spots where it's a little bit lighter, and I'll just work the last bit of dye out of my dauber here. Now for stitching, I'm going to go with a plain black here. You will definitely see it on the sheath. You can't miss a nice stitch. I'm going with the black because I want to keep the sheath a little bit plain. I don't want it to take away from the knife at all. I don't want the sheath to be a distraction or to make it look tacky. I was thinking about going with a bright red stitching to bring out the red in the liners of the knife, which might be cool, but I fear it would come off as tacky. Thought about doing a white, then I thought that it might subtract from the knife as well. So I'm going to go with a black. It's just a nice, clean, kind of a low-key look. Okay, we've got our 2 needles and our thread ready here. Just going to be running a simple saddle stitch. No easy way around this, no fast way. Just 1 stitch at a time by hand. Now here's a little something that I always do with my leather work, and I don't think I learned it anywhere else. I think it's just something I tried and I love the way it worked, and that is I'll scrub just pure beeswax into the end grain of the leather, and I'll just build up a nice sticky layer. And then what I'll do is I'll heat up this little wood burner tool here, this little flat iron, basically just like a soldering iron, and I'll melt that beeswax into the end grain. It just seals off the end grain, gives it a beautiful beautiful smell, and it gives it sort of a luster. It just burnishes the edges beautifully. Seals everything right in from the elements and gives an edge nicer than any other technique I've found. Now, speaking of water resistant finish, we're going to finish it off. This is what I finish my sheaths off with. It's a sheath cream by Knife and Axe, and it's just a blend of different oils. It smells just beautifully, but it's just like a thick, heavy sort of a paste type cream, and you just rub that into the leather. I give it a little buff with my bristle brush, and it just soaks right in. It doesn't leave your sheath greasy at all. It just soaks in and dries to a matte finish. And then with our edge that we already did, when I put a little bit of that sheath cream on there, a little bit of those oils, just look at that finish it gives. Oh, such a beautiful product. Highly recommended. Plus, of course, you kind of need something to put on that raw leather. Now that it's soaked in nicely, just got a standard bristle brush here, just to even out our finish. And now that's what our sheath looks like. We have a beautiful slab of leather here that we stitch into a beautiful jet black sheath for this knife. I think it's going to set it off perfectly. Leatherworking is a fantastic hobby to get into because it's not overly expensive to get into. The tools are pretty minimal. The leather can be a little bit expensive, but it's not hard to get scraps from different leatherworking stores or websites and things like that. Even a hide, just a part of a shoulder, costs you less than $100, and it's just so useful. You can make sheaths for your tools. You could make leather belts, cases, make your own wallets. You can do so much with so little supplies and create something really, really beautiful. Now we are so close to being done this knife. All we have left to do is a final sharpening. We have our bevel roughed in, but now we have to put a razor edge on it for it to really be capable in what it was designed to do. Now in season 1 of the Newfoundland Hobbyist, sharpening, if you recall, was the very first episode of the season, and we saw the topic of sharpening multiple times throughout the season. Hope that's encouraged some of you to take up the habit for yourself to learn the art of sharpening. It's a great hobby both for yourself, so you can service your hunting knives and your woods knives and your kitchen knives, but it also works to be a great little side business because everyone needs sharp tools. Well, we have finally completed the most intricate, labor-intensive knife project I've ever built, and I think it was well worth it. Seeing it now, it is by far my favorite knife I've ever produced. You ready to see it? Just look at this masterpiece. I am beyond happy with it, honestly. It is so much better than what I had pictured in my mind when I started. Those scales turned out absolutely beautifully. Check out those red liners. Just a little hint in there is just not too overpowering, just lovely. Those double pins in the back, the single brass up front, I just think it's so beautiful. And then of course our polished blade in a shape, this profile I am just in love with. I'm definitely going to copy this in the future and build the same shape blade. Because it feels magnificent in the hand. It just feels so perfect in the hand. You can tell that nice old Coke bottle shape, classic, you can't go wrong with. And then that nice deep profile here, that blade extending out so much below, down by your fingers. It is just, I love it so much. Quick edge test to prove its function. That's as much as I'm doing right there to keep the wife happy with me. But it performs just as good as it looks. So that's it for another episode and another project. So happy, like I said, couldn't be happier. Seeing my skills and my product develop over time is very rewarding. That's the beautiful thing about hobbies and things involving handcrafts, is that you get to see progress. It's something tangible that you get to see constantly if you put in a bit of effort. Thank you guys so much for watching. If you followed all the way to the end here, a big thank you. A big shout out to my sponsors who help make this show possible. I'm so appreciative. I hope you guys will go and support them as well. If you're looking for more content like this or to get in touch with me, head over to www.KyleNoseworthy.com. You'll find everything you need. That's it for this week. Make sure you tune in next week to the Newfoundland Hobbyist.